Hi everyone, and welcome to my guide for the Heartseeker Marksman Rogue in Last Epoch Season 2. I've played this on hardcore to level 100 and beyond and pushed it to 1000 plus corruption without any issue. And in fact, I took down Uber Aberov with this setup as well. That was on softcore later on because it took a bunch of tries, but it happened. And well, I want to show you what it's all about. I can just say this build is super fun to play, and with the new Heartseeker skill, it's just an amazing setup. I've played a cold build here. This was initially inspired by Trickster's version that uses the Rain of Winter bow and the Tuaka's Teeth quiver. So it's like a kind of cold focus setup here. And then I just started cooking and freestyling a little bit from there basically. And this is what I came up with. So this build easily goes into the 4-digit corruption. My setup is not even perfect. I've played this character for maybe something like 50 hours or so in total. And I build it very sturdy because of hardcore. So it's pretty comfy, it has auto aiming, it works really well with WASD, especially I gotta say, because you can always like move in the right position and shoot in the other direction, and just kind of works. And it's just fun. Being a rogue, you have very high mobility and usually not that much tankiness, but I managed to actually make it tough enough in order to actually do this fight here, like Uber Aberov, for example. And as I said, even the higher corruptions, you don't have to be that afraid of any kind of like little monster running at you. It can take a hit, and even like most of the boss fights are no big deal. And the rest is just kind of stutter stepping, staying at range, and like this you can also survive much better. I also have a filter and a Viva tree here on this planner, so you can just copy that. The Viva tree, of course, is a little bit up to you. You don't really have to follow exactly this. It just kind of gives you like some pointers of what I was doing. And I have the passive tree here laid out, including all the steps, like how you want to level this up. The skills are here, so we have the individual skill specializations, and you can also follow along the individual progression steps. Now there's one note to make here, which is that you can't play the setup from level 1 exactly, because Heartseeker is a level 30 marksman skill. So this means you need to have 50 points total unlocked, so that's going to happen somewhere at around level 40 or so as you go through the campaign. Before that you have to do something else. Now you can follow, for example, the maximum leveling guide from Tarek, which is very good, but it's a falconer. So if you don't want to do that and just stick to marksman, then I recommend you start with puncture. Puncture has a bunch of nodes that are real good for the early game, which are revolving around bleed chance, the frenzy here, and then this bleeding fury buff. So like this, you can very comfortably go through the early levels all the way to like 10, 15 or something like that. Just kind of like bleeding up monsters, trying to get like physical damage and some bleed on your bow, for example. And later on, I swapped to multi-shot. So multi-shot also has just a lot of passes that buff its damage, its attack speed, and so on. This is a skill that you unlock when you are pretty early on in the marksman tree here. So when you do this, you can very comfortably get through the campaign and into early monoliths, and then at around level 40, level 45, you can swap to Heartseeker and effectively start this exact setup, unspec multi-shot or puncture, and then you can do that. You may notice that the setup only has 4 skills on the bar. This is just because there is nothing else to put here, so I just kind of left it empty. There's no reason to have anything else. We do have, of course, 5 skills specialized, but one of them is just used passively, the shuriken. So it's like a pretty common rogue thing. It gives you extra armor that you can trigger from shift, so you can throw shurikens with shift, and then you just have this like as a passive armor buff basically. It doesn't really do anything. So you have that on a bar, and we also have decoy here unspecialized on the bar that you can just use sometimes, for example, in a boss fight or for nemesis or something like that. And again, this doesn't really require much. You just cast it once in a while and you feel like you need it. It's also not specialized. Instead, there is puncture. So while I just explained that in the early game you're going to rely on those bleed stuff and you actually use puncture, later when you have Heartseeker you don't do that anymore. So puncture will remain a passive ability triggered by Heartseeker, which comes from the straight through node here. Every time you kill something, it will shoot out punctures automatically, and then you have these punctures flying all over the place. So just to show this what it looks like a little bit in action, this is a lot of stuff going on here. So first you have the kind of blue curving arrows here. This is the Heartseeker itself. Then you have these icicles shooting out. This happens every time I crit with a bow. So you want to have a high crit rate. In fact, we have 100% crit rate on this setup. And like this, we shoot out these little ice bolts all the time that fly in a straight line towards enemies. And then you also have these punctures which kind of come out of the corpses and explode everything that is left alive. So this build actually has various damage sources that all contribute. There's also the water orbs from the Eusinus sphere, the relic that we're using, but they are relatively infrequent and I don't think are really contributing all that much, but they give you a nice cold damage buff, so that's also why that is included. So overall, you actually have like a nice package here of multiple different damage sources, and it just feels really good to play. Some of the important things about Heartseeker is that you kind of want to have a bit of recurve chance, but you actually get a lot of it just from the tree up here on the right, especially with the nimble threads. This build stacks a lot of dexterity, so we actually have like multiple angles of scaling here. So we have this for more recurve chance, and we also have, for example, the Morning Frost boots. So we get +1 to cold damage flat added to attacks and spells. For example, the icicles that come from the Rain of Winter are considered spells, and we still scale up those spells thanks to the Morning Frost. And the same goes for the Eusinus sphere, water orbs, for example, and then the bow damage also gets stacked up. So you want to get those boots and a lot of dexterity, but at the same time, this also reduces your resistances for cold and fizz. So you have to pay closer attention to those two resistance types and actually stack up a good bunch more than normal. But what it means in practice is that every time you shoot Heartseeker, it will usually hit a target at least 3-4 times, and it can go all the way to like, 7, 8, 10 times or something, depending on how lucky you get, because every time you hit a target, it will multiply the chance to recurve again by 0.8, and then eventually it will just kind of like time out because of that, because you just like don't hit a successful roll anymore. But the cool thing is that Heartseeker also adds a bunch of good utility that you can opt into, or that we do already. So first of all, we convert it to cold because you already have this whole like cold scaling going on with the boots, for example, and the Rain of Winter bow, for example. So you convert it to cold, which adds, for example, the frostbite chance here. This helps it out to sometimes actually freeze enemies. That's kind of neat. You can also go for example, 1 point here to get a bit of chill chance. Effectively, what happens with Heartseeker, because it's hitting so much, is that any tiny bit of chance to do anything will guarantee the effect on any target that you hit, basically. So even if you have like 5% or 10% of an effect, you will get it easily. And in this case, you can put like 1 point here if you don't have it on your quiver, for example. And the same goes with the slow. You can just, take 1 point out somewhere and you can get a slow here. You can combine both of those effects. I did that early on, for example. I just took out like, 1 point from the damage here or so and put it there and here. And it immediately made all the fights a lot more relaxed, a lot more safe, basically, because you can kite enemies a lot better and they also attack you more slowly. There's also the frailty and the armor shred here. So this is a very high chance, so you're going to get those effects very easily. You can easily go to hundreds of armor shred, which is way too much. You don't need that much, but this skill just kind of does it in like 2 seconds or something. And so you don't have to worry about anything else here as well. Now, the only downside with this node is that the Heartseeker doesn't seek a new target when the previous one dies, but this is only really relevant in AoE situations. And in those cases, you have straight through where, well, you get the punctures, and the punctures just take care of the packs. So while Heartseeker itself doesn't really eat well through big AoE packs, the puncture will do that. And it's also beefed up by a lot of damage nodes. So in the late game, we have just lots of extra damage modifiers here, just like flat damage added. And then we have, more damage against slowed or immobilized. So immobilized doesn't really happen, but the slow does. You get more damage against ailment affected. There's also more per stack of slow. And then finally, the shadow daggers up here as well. So when there's like some really big packs, sometimes you actually get multiple procs of these shadow daggers because punctures keep hitting the same guy, and even rare elites can just blow up from this. And on top of this, we have a nice frenzy activation here in the puncture tree as well, which is kind of neat. So you just get that on the fly as well while you're playing, at least in like echoes, for example. Not on boss fights, but this is how it goes. I can go for the other skill trees here real quick. Shift is basically just there for mobility. It gives you a haste buff, but you have haste very easily from various passives. So this is just kind of there when there's no target or to fight or so. You also get immunity while shifting, so you can go through ground effects and all that kind of stuff, which is neat. It heals you, it gives you mana, although mana is not really a problem in this build. Heartseeker costs effectively nothing, 3 mana, and I think it's even reduced on some effects. So very easy to keep that up. It gives us the Shuriken, as I explained earlier. It's a nice armor buff, so you put the 5 points there. You get also the cleansing, and you also get a cooldown reset in case you get a big hit. So it's like an overall nice package for mobility, and a pretty standard tree here, I guess. And the same goes for the smoke bomb as well. So smoke bomb is just there as a utility. Most notably, we get silver shrouds. What silver shrouds do is that they give you a 100% chance to dodge for the next attack. So this can be strategically used against certain boss attacks, for example. In the case of Uber, for example, you can actually dodge like 100% guaranteed some of the big slams and these kind of things. But you can also use that on all kinds of other scenarios. So this is kind of nice to have. Or it's kind of like a panic button when you actually take a lot of damage and you want to be protected against the next hit or something. Very good. It also cleanses ailments. So you have two different dot cleanses and so on, which is very nice. And other than that, it's just there to give us more defense. So there are Crimson Shroud stacks, for example. There are Dust Shroud stacks for glancing blow chance. And yeah, the rest is just like area, duration, and so on. So this is very useful to use, especially on encounters like Nemesis, bosses, and whenever you feel like you need like a panic button. Now, there's just one thing I want to highlight here in case you want to do a kind of boss-specific setup. You want to replace the puncture with Dark Quiver. So that's what I've done for Uber Aberov. Now, it's not really an Uber Aberov farmer, so you will need some really sick gear to do that somewhat comfortably, but it can be done. In that case, I did this Dark Quiver tree here. So sometimes throughout the fight, I would use this here to buff myself a little bit, so you can get a frenzy buff here, you can get Crimson Shrouds there, you can get a bit of extra recurve for your next Heartseeker, and also more Dust Shroud stacks. So it just kind of helps you out a little bit, but it's overall a relatively minor thing. But since on the boss fight, you can't actually trigger puncture since you don't kill anything, this can be done if you want to be a bit more optimized. Now let's talk about the equipment a little bit more. So we have this set up here. I already explained you have the Reign of Winter. This can be farmed from Hero Rod in the Age of Winter timeline. So this is a boss drop. You have to get it there. You want to get 2 LP, and you see here we have the crit and bow attack speed, and then the other bow attack speed. So this is called the Dead Eyes mod here. This is like the #1 thing you want to get. This is a base critical strike chance, and this gets multiplied by your increases to critical strike chance. So this is a very powerful mod, and it gives you the attack speed on top, so this is insane. So you want to try to get a T7 mod of this at the very least, because this is going to help you a lot in order to cap your crit chance to 100%. And the second piece of the puzzle is the Peak of the Mountain Helm. This is from the Lightless Arbor boss. You can very easily find this even in tier 1 of this dungeon if you want to. You see the drop rates go from only 45 to 50. There's a very small range between the tiers of the dungeon. So even at low levels you can get this. And this thing has up to 290% increased crit. And it has +5 to all attributes. It's also very easy to get at least 3 LP on that thing. So I definitely recommend to try to farm a 3 LP version of this. And then you're going to slam in a bunch of stuff like Extra Life, Int, Dex. Actually, about the Int, maybe I should mention that right now. That might be confusing. But, well, we have 12 attunement here on this Reign of Winter bow, which can roll like 10 to 15 or something like that. And you want to even out your Int and your attunement. So in that case, I actually slammed 12 Int to match the 12 attunement. That is because of the Use and Use Sphere. So it has this effect here where it shoots out the water orbs, but if your attunement and int are equal, then you get 3 of them. And this means you get triple the cold damage buff from this. So normally you get 120 cold damage as a buff, and with this equal int and attunement, you get 360, which is a pretty notable upgrade. Even in a late game, this is something like 20 to 30% DPS. So just this one int mod here somewhere on a legendary like this can actually give you a sizable damage boost. Then we have the Turaka's Teeth. This is this quiver here. It just has kind of decent stats here. You have the bleed chance that is converted to frostbite chance, so you can stack that up very easily. It also gives freeze rate to puncture, so sometimes even freeze packs as you go through the maps and so on. It has a bit of cold damage, freeze rate multiplier. So it's just kind of like a nice package, and it's also relatively easy to get free LP on this thing. So ideally you would get maybe something like another cold damage roll here, and then maybe put like the chill or the slow in the Heartseeker tree. But this is what I got on my quiver here. So I just had attack speed, which is like the best mod, and then just a tiny bit of chill and a tiny bit of slow chance. They don't even have to be T5, because as I said, you have so many hits per second, you instantly proc everything. So you need like the tiniest chance and it's fine. I have the Swine here. This is just a stat stick, so we don't have curses. This is just a good amulet. There can be pretty much anything else here. You can run Nihilis, you can even run Omnis if you want. You have some options here, but this just kind of helps a lot, especially because I went for the red rings. Again, red rings is just like a good item, not really crucial to the build. In fact, I started using them very late because I had to first farm some of them. Unfortunately, I only got one of them that actually turned out really great, and the other one was well, it should be also dexterity like this here, but I actually just had nothing because I kept getting some trash and legendary stats on it. But either way, double red ring just kind of helps to make this setup more tanky. Even as a marksman, I was able to, you know, as I said, go all the way to 1000 plus corruption, do Uber Arbor off. It's actually kind of crazy how tanky you can be, which is in large parts thanks to this red ring combo here. Now, they're hard to get. Before that, I was just using some random rings. I used like the Weaver's Will rings, for example, as like a twink item. You can put like anything there that has decent stats, like, you know, life, cold damage, some dexterity. That's basically what you want. And before you get something like that. Also had another portent. It's kind of like a similar thing. It doesn't have anything special. It's just like a very defensive piece here. Very good for hardcore. So if you can get something like that with a +4 to Heartseeker, that's neat. Otherwise, just like any good exalted chest that has, you know, good life and +4 Heartseeker or so also works. You can potentially slam some other items here as well. Nothing crucial to the build. And well, the gloves, they are from Uber Abarov himself, so they're pretty tough to get as well. You can also replace with pretty much anything else. So they're just another kind of like extra defensive piece. They don't really have any special effect that makes the build what it is or something like that. It's just a big defensive item. So you can go for something like Ravenous Void if you have those lying around, or some good exalted glove like an Eternal Gauntlet with some dex, some health, and, you know, some good stats basically. So before you get all this here, you can definitely get away with a lot of exalted stuff. You mostly just want to get the bow here. You want to get the helm. So those are both boss drops, easy to farm. Even like a 1 LP version of this thing is very easy to get. And same here, like 1 or 2 LP is like no problem at all. This quiver is also very common, Rune of Ascendance 1 in 5. And here this relic is also relatively easy to get with 1 or 2 LP at the very least. So once you have those 4 pieces, you kind of have like the main combo online. And then it's just all about the Morning Frost and dex stacking. So you want to get as much dex as you can everywhere. And for the belt, I just had this here because this is like a crazy belt that I crafted. So I just kind of stuck with this forever. But there's also like a legendary belt that might have some decent effects here. If you get like 2 LP or even 3 LP on some stuff, you can go for that. It's mostly just a stat stick here. And for the idols, Throne of Ambition, a very powerful item. This is a cold damage build, so you just get 40% more cold damage, 40% more armor, easy to keep up because your Heartseekers fly everywhere. So this is, even while running echoes, basically always up after you stacked it. So very neat, you want to get that. This is also from Timeline boss, God Hunter Argentus in Stone Lands. Pretty easy to farm, so you want to try to get one of those as soon as you can. And all the other idols are just extra life and then extra resistances. So we have a bunch of like elemental res ones here, cold res ones, because Morning Frost eats into our cold res a lot. Same with the fizz res, you want to get a bunch of fizz res, and then whatever else is like missing, you just try to fill the gaps a little bit. Now early on, you might not have those idols to like, you know, have those stats exactly. It takes a while to get them. So try to prioritize your resistances a little bit early on. Try to put some res maybe on your rings or, you know, your gloves or something like that, until you actually have the full combo. For the blessings, this is what I have here. So we start with the Black Sun. This is the ward gain on kill and the ward decay threshold. It just kind of makes running echoes a little bit more, you know, chill and a bit more tanky. So I went with that, but there's also like a void rest buff and a crit buff you can go for. So if you need those, if you're not capped on crit or rest, then you can do that. That's fine. Here's the crit avoidance from Reign of Dragons. I definitely recommend to take that because it just solves all of your crit avoidance on its own. You need it a 65% roll and get 35% from the passive tree. Then you're completely capped and you don't have to worry about it. Here you have the Spirits of Fire blessing. I took Endurance, which was mostly because I had a random Endurance red ring as like a legendary potential outcome. So I kind of like went for that. So I have 60% Endurance. There's also an Armor one, which is very good, which is what I was running most of the time actually. So either way works. Then you have the Age of Winter one, the Shred Cold Res. This also stacks up instantly. So you get the -20 res on bosses, -50 on other targets. It's a very nice damage buff. And we have the Lagon Blessing here, extra cold damage. So it's also pretty neat. And lastly, for the passive tree, so you can follow the progression along. First of all, you put 20 points into Rogue because otherwise you can't go into the Marksman tree. You want to go there as soon as possible. We mostly just pick up the attack speed and flat damage. And then we also go for Agility, where we get haste buff all the time. So you basically always have haste as long as you have a target. And even without, we have shift to get haste, for example, so you're always going pretty fast. And then also later on we stack this up here, so you just take less damage while moving. So there's another thing to consider here. Stutter stepping is very good because of this as well, because you sometimes just get hit while in movement, and in that case you have a damage reduction effect. And then we go into the marksman tree. So the stuff we take first here is just kind of like more attack speed. We also get health gain here, so this is our sustain. You may notice on the peak of the mountain helm it says that you cannot leech, and we don't invest into leech, but well, we have this at least, and this actually keeps you alive really well. So you refill your hive really fast with this. There's also another healing effect here later on with the health on crit per stack of Barrage of Pain. So like this, we actually have a lot of healing here, which made me able to tank even dots on Uber Aberroth, for example. Then we invest into concentration. This is a just don't get hit effect, basically. So as long as you don't take any hits in the last 4 seconds, you have this buff. You get more damage and more movement speed and less damage taken for like one-shots especially, which is very neat. Also more armor shred here, so it's kind of nice. Just going to invest in that. And then we continue here to the right. This is the crit avoidance that I mentioned. It also gives us a bit nice damage buff. And together with the Reign of Dragons timeline blessing, you get 100% here. And then we continue on. We get some random zero shots every 10 seconds by just attacking. So sometimes you just have this 100% dodge effect, which is neat. So it's very hard to time this, but it just kind of helps you, especially when you go around and like kind of off-screen enemies all the time. Very often you're just going to be protected from this automatically, which is very cool. Then we have the sharpshooter buff here. You don't really need to invest much into this. You may be tempted to put 4 points and then go to death from afar, but we need neither the armor shred nor the stun in my book. So I just went with 2 points here, and this just gives you easy 10 stacks of this buff. It's a very powerful buff, and yeah, you don't really need more than that. So this just does a lot on its own. Then we have like a nice crit buff here, and lastly we fill out the rest here. So there's like this crit multi and health gain, there's extra recurve chance, and after that we just kind of like pick up more stats all over the place. We pick up a glancing blow chance as well. So you see this here, this is just dexterity and health, and then we go for glancing blow here. We try to get as high as possible with the glancing blow. There's also, for example, the Blade Dancer tree that gives you a glancing blow chance. Then we fill this out here with the movement speed, and then towards like level 90, level 100, you just kind of like invest into like random points that give you like a little bit of dex, and here's a little bit of health and dodge. And lastly, I took the extra maximum endurance threshold and dodge as well from the Falconer tree. But yeah, these are like the last 13 levels that you take. I'd say by level 80 or so, you basically have everything you need here, and the rest is just kind of like, you know, min-maxing a little bit and trying to get more dexterity so that you can get the red rings online once you get them. It's not that easy to get enough attributes. You need 180 across all the attributes, but the red rings themselves give you 25 already each, so that's 50. And then you also have the swine here that can go up to 4 all attributes, that can be 20. And the vitality also goes, I think, up to 11 or something like that. So you can get something like 30 plus from that. And those 3 items together are already like half of what you need, basically. And you get a bunch from the tree, and then you can try to get a bunch of like, you know, extra dexterity, which you wanna legendary slam into a lot of our pieces here anyway. And like this, you can reach this requirement for red rings for Atlaria. And that also pretty much concludes the guide. So I have this link down in the description, my planner. I'll also link to the Maxwell guide as well, which is a bit different. It's like a fire version. Well, actually not. It's actually still scaling cold damage with Morning Frost, but it uses the Dragon Song bow and then uses the fire tag on the Heartseeker. This is like an alternative way to play Heartseeker. I tried it briefly, but I didn't really like it. I think it has higher damage output, but it's like more close range, and you have to like always like look towards the enemies because it has like a frontal cone fire AoE basically. It's a bit like a fire breath. That didn't really feel that great to me, and especially on hardcore, I really like the cold version. You freeze enemies, it works at range just fine because the icicles fly all over the screen, and I really loved the visuals as well. So it was just kind of cool to have the blue Heartseeker, the blue icicles, the blue puncture all going off together. But there is like this alternative version as well, so I can go check that out. And for the filter, I also have this linked down in the description. I have this set up mostly for endgame, but if you start using that at like level 60 plus or something, once you're in monoliths, then you're totally fine with it, I think. There is a filter for like early game gear, but it's not super optimized for campaign. So just keep that in mind. For the late game though, I think I made a pretty good filter there. So that's it. I had a ton of fun with the Heartseeker. I will see if I make another build. Otherwise, I'm probably going to be on Diablo 4 again soon. And maybe we'll come back to blasting more Last Epoch, making another 1 or 2 builds later in May or something like that. For now, this is what I got here. So stay tuned. Hope you enjoyed this. Good luck with the rogue. And I'll see you guys next time.